welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing something unlike anything we've ever done on this channel before. I did not mean to, we are going to be doing a Clash Royale card tier list. So first I want to get things straight. Game's kind of coming back. I used to play this game all the time. And I kind of stopped for about 2 months, just came back a little bit ago. Yeah. So, I'm also recording this very late at night. So, sorry if I sound very tired, because I am. And, I just want to get one thing straight. I did not look at any stats for this. This is completely off of my personal opinion, based on cards I face and how annoying they seem to be, cards I use and how useful they seem to be. So for cards that I don't really face that much and I don't use, I'm just gonna assume they're not very good because they don't get much. They don't get enough use, obviously, and if they don't get enough use, if they don't get much, if people don't use them very much, they're not gonna get. It's probably because they're not very good cards. So yeah, without further ado, let's start. All right, let's start with the Wizard. In my opinion, this card's a little underrated. I use this card in all of my decks actually, because while yes, it gets countered very easily, all the cards that counter it, or not all, but most of the cards that counter it are like a higher elixir cost. And a negative elixir trade just means, like, do you really want that? Same with like spell combinations, like a fireball and a log or something, or fireball zap. Yeah, they all just die. And honestly, it's so good versus swarm damage. It actually has pretty decent single target damage. It doesn't die to a fireball, and it counters almost all cards that are lower elixir than it. Its biggest weakness, I would say, is a Valkyrie. However you say it, Valkyrie, I say Valkyrie, but whatever. Yeah, I think that's its biggest weakness. Oh, Poison's also able to kill it, but damage over time doesn't really work as well. And Poison's not used very much, although I use it in one of my decks. X-Bow I'm gonna give A tier. It's one of the most annoying cards I can possibly face. I would say it takes almost no skill to use whatsoever. And I'm very glad I just have a Valkyrie, a mini P.E.K.K.A, and a Wizard just to slap that Tesla X-Bow combo, and then go further with a nice counter push that they have to defend. Overall, it's usually either damage or positive elixir trade. But yeah, for Zap, again, another A tier card. I would say that Zap is certainly a good counter to a lot of lower health cards, or this doesn't happen as often, but like underleveled goblins or underleveled minions. While it doesn't happen that often, it's very nice when it does, for sure. But it's really good versus skeleton armies. It can do a decent job at countering things like dark goblins, or prevent a lot of damage from archers. And on top of that, it's good for like retargeting. So let's say you have a golem and a Skarmy down, and the enemy P.E.K.K.A is attacking a golem. You can zap that P.E.K.K.A and it'll just start attacking the skeleton army, wasting so much damage. I'm gonna call it Larry Army for the rest of this video. Not Skarmy. Who says that anymore? It's Larry Army. For Zappies, this is a tough call, but I'm gonna go with D tier. No, C, but it's borderline D. I almost never face this card. I never use it. And honestly, when I do face it, it's so easy to counter. I can just... It's really weak to arrows. About a year ago, arrows got a huge buff, so any card that's weak to arrows, you'll see significantly lower on this list. Sorry, I can't speak. Probably because I'm so tired. For Battle Healer, this card, it's a really high skill use. It's a high skill cap card for sure. And for someone like me who is not very good at the game, well, I won't say I'm not very good, but I don't know how to necessarily use the super high skill cap cards. I'm gonna go with C tier, although it is probably higher for someone who can use it really well. But honestly, while it sounds like such a good card on paper, it just doesn't do enough damage for the elixir it costs. And I can never seem to get that position where I have it behind a tank and it actually heals the tank enough to the point where it's significant. I just can never put myself in that position, as hard as I try. I'm sure other players might be better at that though, so I'm not gonna say that it's a really bad card necessarily. So that's why I'm putting in C. Battle Ram, D tier. And considering how low skill it requires, I would say that it's a pretty bad card. It requires almost no skill to use, and really, it gets countered by way too much. Not arrows, but it gets countered by a lot of really powerful cards in this meta. And like I said at the beginning, this is entirely off of my opinion. I don't actually know what the stats are. I don't face Battle Ram very much, but those rare occasions when I do, I almost always win the match. And, alright. Before I go any further, I just want to talk a little bit more about the tier list overall. Feel free to put in the comments what your opinions are. So F tier is like, just don't use it. D tier is use it if you have it over leveled. C is a little below average. B is average. A is above average. S is very good and like you need to use it. Maybe not need to, because there's probably going to be more than 8 S tier cards. Haven't really made that decision yet, but there's probably going to be more than 8 S tier cards. And best card is just the card that you need to have in, I won't say all your decks, but it fits into almost every deck. And, alright, let's continue moving. Bomb Tower. I'm not sure how to rank this one. I rarely ever face it, so I'm gonna give it C, but borderline D. It's weak against single target damage for sure, and it has good group damage, I guess, but the slow attack speed just kind of makes it bad. And since you mostly want to use other buildings like Inferno Tower, Tesla, and cannons for single target damage, you don't really see Bomb Tower a whole lot and for building choice. Although it is fair that you don't really see a whole lot of buildings. Well, I won't say that, but you don't face so many buildings that it's like meta, because it's absolutely not meta. Alright, next card, Bomber. B tier. I face it a lot for sure. Like, too much, I would say. But I never seem to have a problem dealing with it. I mean, it's a nice 2 elixir cycle, but if you're going for cycle, you might as well take a 1 elixir card. It almost never seems to be a pain to use for me. So, yeah. I'm gonna go with B tier. Or not a pain to use, a pain to deal with. Bowler. B, but borderline C. Bowler, I don't really face it that often, but when I do, it seems to annoy the living crap out of me. It is so annoying. I lose almost every time I face it, but I just don't face it enough to really consider this a really good card. And in one of my other decks, my P.E.K.K.A can counter it pretty well. So yeah. Cannon, I think this is another underrated card, although I don't use it very often. I'm gonna go C, but borderline B. For 3 Elixir, it can sure do a lot of damage, and it's not really that good outside of Hog Cycle, but Hog Cycle seems to be pretty dominant right now. I used to beat it every time with one of my main decks, now I lose to it every time with that same deck. Although that deck might have had it like a nerfed card or something, but I doubt it. Hog Cycle just seems to be way better now. But, yeah. Now for the other cannon, I will say Cannon Cart is B tier, and pretty much right in the middle of B. I don't really face Cannon Cart that much, and I don't really ever seem to struggle dealing with it. But when I do use Cannon Cart in like draft battles or something, it seems to be pretty good. And also, I probably should have clarified this at the beginning of the video. This is just normal 1v1 battles, no triple elixir, no infinite elixir, not even like double elixir all match long. It can be draft, but nothing that changes the actual gameplay once you have your cards selected. No touchdown, no 2v2. So yeah. Now for the clone, really, I gotta say F tier for this one. Clone, you don't need, it's such a bad card. I never face it, but when I do, it just always seems to get the enemy nowhere. The clone troop always dies instantly, probably because I use arrows, but it just seems like the clone troop dies instantly every time, which makes it so easy to deal with. And because obviously 1 HP, clone not doing so good right now, and I don't really know how you would buff it besides like decreasing the elixir cost or buffing radius, which I really don't think would help that much. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at F tier, and I don't see it getting much better. Dark Prince. This is a tough call. I'm gonna go B though. Pretty much right in the middle of B. I don't face Dark Prince enough to really get a accurate evaluation, especially considering every time I face Dark Prince, it's like 50-50 win or lose. Half the time I face it, I get completely destroyed, and half the time I face it, I beat it so bad that it's broken beyond repair. It just doesn't... It's hard to evaluate this one, so I'll just give it middle of B tier. Alright, now for the first S tier, Dark Goblin. Dark Goblin, I don't use this card, but the only reason I don't use it is because it's underleveled. It's a really, really good defensive card. And anytime, I don't face it much, that's for sure, but I'll use it in draft battles sometimes, and anytime I do, I crush with that card. It's very, I will say this, it's very weak to arrows, so it's borderline A tier. It's weak to arrows, it's weak to log, which are two very good cards in the meta right now. Zap and Snowball, it also is weak to. So Yeah, not the best versus those cards, but it's really nice to have on defense. It does a lot of damage over time. Just the low health prevents it from being higher, but that range is it's so good. And just for 3 elixir, you're getting that much damage from that kind of distance. It's hard to pass that up. Archers. These used to be in lower B, and now they're in lower C. And that's entirely because of the arrows buff. Just because arrows is being used more, and it one-shots archers that are the same level as the arrows, or if the arrows are the higher level. The archers just don't seem to do enough damage anyway. So, for 3 elixir, they just aren't doing enough damage, and a lot of meta cards counter it pretty easily. Well, I won't say a lot of meta cards, because Dark Goblin doesn't, and most of the cards that are in the meta are more than 3 elixir. So, next up, Earthquake, D tier. Honestly, I'm not going to put it in F, but you probably should never bring an Earthquake into battle with you, because while it is very good versus buildings, you can't trust the luck that you're gonna face buildings. Now, like in a touchdown game or something, it's a really good card. It's S tier at least, maybe even best card, but, well, okay, probably not that. I won't go that far with it. But Earthquake is a really good card if you know you're gonna face buildings. But until you know you're gonna face buildings, Earthquake is a pretty bad card. Electro Dragon, B tier. I really don't know how to rank this one. I don't face it very often. I'm gonna say lower B, but it's pretty much insignificant towards. It's bad single target damage, although against an Inferno it's really good. But other than that, or Sparky, other than that, it's bad. For single target damage, it's very bad it's okay for group damage, I guess. But it doesn't have enough group damage to really provide that damage output you would want. So a damage buff would probably be effective for an Electro Dragon. Plus cards like Wizard and Dark Goblin counter it pretty well. So, yeah. Electro Giant, our first big win condition. This is a tough call. Oh, I guess Expo is technically a good win condition. But this is a tough call to make. I'm really not sure what to put Electro Giant in. I'll go with B tier, but this is entirely my opinion. Just because most of the cards that I use counter it really easily. But when I use it, it always seems to crush, so. Thank you for adding this card, Supercell. I destroy every time I use it, and I destroy it every time I face it. Electro Spirit, it's A tier, just like pretty much any other cycle card. Cycle cards are really good for getting your win condition back in your hand. So, yeah, never deny cycle cards. They are very good to have. And while I don't use one in any of my main decks, I'm not going to deny that they're bad to have. Or that they're good to have on hand. Electro Wizard, similar thing. It's, well, not a cycle card, but it counters a lot. That spawn damage basically counters any swarm. Counters any Inferno, Sparky. Like, completely counters those, and it's pretty good for single target damage. It's good for 2 targets, I guess. Well, not really. But thankfully it's not weak to arrows, which is a big plus. It's weak to Valkyrie, which is another pretty good card to have in your deck right now, but overall, Electro Wizard, it's a good card to have. I don't use it personally, but that's really just because it's underleveled. Elite Barbarians I'm gonna put in the B tier. My god, I cannot stand the existence of this card. I hate facing it. It is like the lowest of the low in terms of skill required. It's so annoying to deal with. But I don't usually have particularly a difficult time dealing with it. Like, my P.E.K.K.A can usually take it, Sparky can usually take it, Mini P.E.K.K.A or Valkyrie, Goblin Gang. I don't really use Larry Army that much. But honestly, there's a lot of cards that can deal with it quite well. So yeah. Elixir Collector. Wow, this card is probably the card I see the least of all cards in 1v1 gameplay. I literally never face this card, so it's kind of impossible to give a good evaluation, but I think I'm going to give it D because it takes so long to pay you back that elixir you lost, and I think a rage does speed it up a little bit, but then again you're spending elixir on the rage spell. And plus, if it gets destroyed, well, congratulations, you just wasted 6 elixir. It's not a good card to have right now, and even with, like, tanks being good, don't use an elixir collector, preferably. Not a good idea. Elixir Golem, I'm gonna go with, tough call, but A. I usually struggle when I face this card, have it too underleveled to actually use, so yeah. It's an alright card, I guess. Executioner, I'm gonna go with A, but borderline B. This is for one main reason. It's basically does the same thing as the wizard for the same elixir cost, but less single target damage, so it's not really that good. I'll use it if I have to, but I would really much prefer wizard. On the other hand, Fire Spirit is also A tier, but borderline S tier instead of borderline B tier. This is because Fire Spirit is just an overall really good defensive card against Larry Army, Minion Horde. I think it got nerfed against Goblin Barrel to where it can only kill 1 instead of all 3, but against Goblin Gang, Larry Army, Minion Horde, Minions, Goblins, Spear Goblins, there's so many cards I can name that it does a really good job at countering. And I think Dark Goblin as well, which is good if placed correctly, obviously. But besides the point. Fire Spirit, for being 1 elixir, you can't counter it necessarily without it being a negative elixir trade. Unless you're starting a counter push, like with a golem or something. If you were to place a golem and then the Fire Spirit just flies into that, obviously the Fire Spirit didn't do a whole lot to help stop that push. But that kind of counteracts how you play those cards. That would usually be good. So if it's underleveled, then it might not be the best, but Fire Spirit, it is definitely not a card to ignore. Alright, Arrows. I've mentioned this card a lot throughout the video. I'm putting it in S tier. And the reason I'm not putting it in best card is because I'm going to say best card until the end. Like, I'm not going to put it in right away as best card. I'm going to pick from the S tiers and see what I would think the best card is to have in your deck. For Fireball, I'm gonna go with A tier. A lot of cards in this game, like Wizard, I think Electro Wizard, yeah, like Wizard, Hunter, Ice Wizard, or did Ice Wizard get nerfed? I can't remember. Yeah, just a lot of cards in this game barely survive a Fireball, which is why it's not S tier. If Fireball ever got a damage buff, it would definitely be S tier. If it could start countering all those cards, killing them in one hit. Or Night Witch, Witch, those are perfect examples as well. Fireballies are things like Mudgarcher, as I call it. Oh, Musketeer's another thing. Three Musketeers and Musketeer, it does not kill in one hit. Mother Witch, it's good at killing in one hit. But, like, other than things like that, it's not very good at one-shotting. But it can do a pretty good job at dealing just a little bit of damage. Every last hit helps, after all. So, yeah, a damage buff would definitely be, like, making it top of the meta if it was to get a damage buff, but that's probably why I don't think it's going to get a damage buff. Have it over-leveled, it's insane. Don't have it over-leveled, probably just A tier. For Firecracker, I'm going to put this in lower B tier, and let me tell you why. It's an overrated card, by a lot. And honestly, it doesn't take much skill to use, but it does take good skill to work around. Like, if you know how to counter this thing effectively, it's a horrible card. And the reason I'm putting it as high as B tier is because it can do quite a bit of damage before you counter it the effective way. And on top of that, most players, I won't say most, but a good amount of players do not know how to counter it the effective, I would say, way. And I'll tell you why it's such a good way to counter it. Firecracker, there's 4 different tiles that you can place on either side of the King Tower. And if you have a card, a single unit card like a Wizard, Dark Prince, Valkyrie, Bandit, Lumberjack, you get the idea. Single unit cards. It can even be a card that's not good for defense like that, like an Ice Golem. Although it can't be a building. You can place any single unit card, and if you time it right, which it's not hard to time, the King Tower gets activated. And if you activate your King Tower, that's a huge advantage automatically. Everyone knows that, despite taking a little bit of damage from the, I would say, shrapnel. Is that the right word for it? That comes out of the Firecracker's shot. Yeah. Fisherman, C tier. Don't face it very often, and when I do, it's never a threat. It's only 3 elixir, but it honestly never screws me up, like, ever. It's not even hard to... well, it's a little hard to use, but not that hard. So, for Flying Machine, I'm gonna say D tier. No, C. Lower C for sure. It's a Fireball-y, which is an automatic minus, and it's countered by a lot of the best cards with a negative elixir trait, but still, it is countered by a lot of the best cards, such as a Wizard, or if it's attacking something else, like your tank or something that you have in front of your other cards in the push, you could put it, you could say it gets countered easily by a Dark Goblin or the Spear Goblins, something that counters it. It has low enough health to the point where that's the case. Doesn't do enough damage to make up for it. And despite being an air unit, it's just not that good. Freeze, B tier. I mean, I'm really not sure what else to put this in. It's good at stopping enemy troops. It's so annoying to face. But it just stops your enemies from defending something without placing anything else. Like, if you're, let's say your Sparky or your P.E.K.K.A. is on the tower and it's about to die, or your Balloon, that's a much better example. It's about to die right before it reaches the tower. Just freeze the tower. They gotta place something now. Otherwise, your Balloon's gonna do a lot of damage. So yeah, Freeze is a pretty nice card if you just are looking for saving yourself a bit of time, allowing a little bit more damage to be done, because all damage helps in the end. So yeah, Furnace, this is a hard call. I'm gonna go with B tier. I mean, think about it. One Fire Spirit every like 10 seconds, that's a pretty good deal. Like, it's hard to pass something like that up. Unlike the base Fire Spirit, Furnace always seems to be a threat. And, well, I'm not going to say unlike, it's just like the base Fire Spirit. Furnace always seems to be a threat. Counters a lot of my pushes when it... No, I won't say it counters a lot of my pushes. It's less defensive and requires much better timing if you want to use on defense, but it can be very annoying to deal with on offense, as it can, like, it'll do good crown tower damage if nothing is done about it, and it can be just annoying to deal with when it kills your swarms that you put on defense, like Larry Army, Goblin Gang, and I guess a Minion Horde, although it doesn't do enough damage to kill them instantly. But yeah. For the Giant, I'm gonna go with B. I don't like to use this card. I don't face it very often, but it's just the most basic tank in the game. It's a 5 elixir card that has a lot of health, does okay damage, slow movement speed, basically the complete average tank. Nothing special about it, and overall nothing bad about it. Targets buildings only. The problem is with this card, it's weak against a lot of much lower elixir cards like Larry Army, Goblin Gang, either of the Infernos, Mini P.E.K.K.A, Lumberjack, Night Witch. There's just so many cards that the Giant is weak against, which is why I'm unable to put it at a higher spot. Dark Goblin, not really. So yeah. Giant Skeleton, I'm gonna go with lower B tier. It's hard to use well. It's hard to get it to the tower because most players know that it would be very bad if it reached the tower, because it does a lot of crown tower damage with the Death Bomb, which is why that's usually, in 90% of cases, avoided. So yeah, Snowball. For the same reason as Zap, it's A tier. I don't really feel like I need to explain this one too much, as it does almost the exact same thing as Zap, besides a little bit of less retargeting, but has knockback. So, yeah. It's better in different situations than Zap, and worse in some situations than Zap. It's... Overall, I would rate them about the same in terms of power, as they do pretty much the exact same thing. Same damage, same elixir cost, just one has knockback and one has a stun. Goblin Barrel D tier. It's countered so easily. Log, arrows, some very good cards in the meta. Fire Spirit, although I don't think it does anymore. I could be wrong on that, but Zap, Snowball, all very good cards at dealing with Goblin Barrel for a lower elixir price than the original, than the Goblin Barrel itself, which is surprising because Goblin Barrel was only 3. Just goes to show that it gets countered super easily. And as an offensive card, any player that uses spells can probably counter this card pretty easily. Sometimes you might get a negative elixir trade against it, but realistically, this card's almost never going to do solid damage. If you have it over leveled and they don't counter it, it's going to do a lot though. So there is that, but I wouldn't rely on it being over leveled. Because is that necessarily a good thing to rely on? Not really. So, yeah. Baby Dragon. I'm gonna go with B tier with this one. I do face a lot of Baby Dragons. I'm gonna go with upper B tier. It's annoying to face, I'll say that, but cards that counter pretty well are Wizard, Fireball, and not really a whole lot else that's meta. I guess a Dark Goblin if placed correctly. And I guess there's a few lower end cards that do well against Baby Dragon. It seems like the meta cards do bad against Baby Dragon, and the lower end cards do good against it. Like a Mega Minion does well. A Musketeer does well. A lot of cards that are not doing as well in the meta seem to do pretty well against Baby Dragons. So, next, Goblin Cage. This card's gone through a series of nerfs, and I don't consider it to be very good anymore. It's middle of B tier, but honestly, it's not nearly as good as it used to be. So now, Goblin Cage, I will say. Or not Goblin Cage, Goblin Drill. I'm gonna go with C tier. It's good for doing guaranteed damage, but the guaranteed damage that it does do is not nearly enough to make up for the amount of elixir you're spending. Because by that logic, you might as well just use a Fireball or arrows if you're going for that kind of guaranteed damage. And it always seems to get countered very easily. Like, some of the best cards in the game right now, like Valkyrie, or Goblin Gang. Some of the cards that seem to do best whenever I face or use them are all very good against Goblin Drills. So yeah, Goblin Drill, not doing so good right now. Goblin Gang, upper A tier. Upper A tier for sure. It's definitely, it's not instantly gonna die to a zap or a snowball, which is a huge plus already. Yeah, that's about it for that. It's good versus tanks as well. I used it in my main deck. So yeah, that's about it. Goblin Giant. This is a hard card to rank, actually. 6 elixir seems like a fair amount for the Goblin Giant. I'll put it in the B tier. I mean, it's like your average tank pretty much. Well, a little less average because it has 2 spear goblins sitting in its back, constantly dealing damage even before the Goblin Giant's dead, but, you know, who cares about that? Yeah, overall, Goblin Giant's a very annoying card to face, but I don't really face it that often. So, I'm gonna put it in the B tier. Goblin Hut, another B tier card. I'm very sorry for yawning so much in this video. I am extremely tired. I'm probably gonna go to bed after I finish recording this and uploading. Goblin Hut, it does a good amount of damage over time, but it's pretty easy to counter. And I would say, for some reason, I seem to have a harder time countering it than my opponents do when I use the card. But overall, it's not a bad card to have, but it's definitely not something that you would prefer over a bunch of other of the best cards in the game. For goblins, I'm putting it in D tier, and this is for a very similar reason as Goblin Barrel. So easy to counter. Now, normally these cards, these two elixir goblins don't like to. They don't go on offense. They don't do that very well, and they defend all right, I guess. But it seems like this card always fails to do its main job. I don't face it enough, but it always seems like bats or Larry Army, Goblin Gang always seems to do that job a lot better than goblins do. Now, for the Golem, I've mentioned this card a lot in the video, and it's pretty reasonable why. It's the highest HP tank in the game for 8 elixir. It's okay, I guess. I face it sometimes and I counter it pretty easily, but that's mostly because I use a lot of tank counters like Mini P.E.K.K.A in one deck, P.E.K.K.A in another, Sparky. I don't use Inferno in either of the Infernos actually, but I have Goblin Gang, Mini P.E.K.K.A, P.E.K.K.A, Sparky, and a lot of just overall good tank counters to have. But yeah, it seems to be a card that is annoying, and the cards that get placed behind it usually just get countered by Wizard or Poison in most cases. Wizard, Poison, or Arrows, or Fireball, and sometimes Log, I guess. Alright, Graveyard. I don't necessarily feel like ranking this one, because I don't at all have any idea where to put it. Never face it. I'm gonna go with C tier. It makes sense to be put in C tier, I would say, because it does damage, I guess, but it's so easy to counter with like a simple Valkyrie or Bats. a lot of lower elixir cards counter this pretty easily. And honestly, it makes sense why. The delay in the spawn makes it so that the skeletons just can't do the damage they probably normally would. So yeah. For guards, it's between B and C. I'm gonna go with C just because of how amazing of a job Arrows does at countering it. Not only does Arrows completely get rid of the shield, but it completely kills them, which is something no other spell in this game can do. I guess poison, but that's a negative elixir trade, and you don't really want to use poison on guards. That's not the ideal strategy here. Arrows is a very, very strong counter to guards. Yeah, I'm gonna go with C tier. It's honestly such a good card. Why did I say that? It's not a very good card. It's so easy to counter, but it honestly doesn't do enough damage to really help you on defense. There's other cards that you would much rather use than guards. So yeah, guards are probably C tier. Heal Spirit, A tier, for obvious reasons. It's just like the other cycle cards. It's just like Fire Spirit and Electro Spirit, although it heals instead of deals damage. It's a good card, and I would not underestimate it if I were you. A Heal Spirit. It's much better than Battle Healer for helping healing your troops, in my opinion. Maybe not consistently, but overall, I would just say that the Heal Spirit seems to... Actually, yes, it's much better at healing your troops consistently, just not constantly. But that's why it's only one elixir, am I right? Good cycle card, and actually kind of helps with pushes. Like if say your entire push just got Fireball, place a Heal Spirit. If there's something next to all the troops that's... If there's something next to all the troops for the Heal Spirit to attack, it's gonna do a lot of damage. Trust me on that one. I would think that I would know that, considering I've played the game for a while. Balloon, I'm gonna go with middle of A tier, but slightly closer to B than S. It's such an annoying card to face. And honestly, some of the combinations I see put with Balloon take probably zero skill to use. Lumberjack, Rage, oh my god. Balloon Rage combo is just so dumb. It's dumb broken. And that is a combo I wish nobody used, but apparently it's too good not to. But in all reality, Balloon is a good card. Just extremely annoying. For Hog Rider, I'm gonna stick it straight in the A tier. The Hog Cycle decks are so good. They're really annoying to face, but outside of that, you don't really see a whole lot of Hog Rider. The Hog Rider does a lot of damage, and it's very annoying to deal with. I can always mini P.E.K.K.A it, but honestly, unless I time things very well, mini P.E.K.K.A doesn't seem to stop it from getting at least one hit, which I don't know the cause of that. It always seems like randomness. But I'm 100% sure that's not the case. So yeah. Hog Rider is very annoying to deal with. Hate it. But it's a good card to have. I'm taking a very long time to record this, so I should probably make this a bit faster. Hunter, C tier, just doesn't kind of tanks as well as other cards do. And you have to be up close in order for it to even do its good damage. Ice Golem, B tier. It makes sense why I'm putting it in B tier. It tanks health for things like Hog Riders or tanks, but for 2 elixir it's alright, just doesn't do enough damage. Ice Spirit, A tier, just like the other spirits. Good cycle, and it can always do a good job at stopping something. Ice Wizard, B tier. It's very, 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 very annoying to deal with. Probably the third most annoying card to deal with. Third to only Elite Barbarians and Mega Knight. I absolutely hate facing those cards. So, yeah. But overall, it does a good job of what it does best. Just counter easily, I guess. But annoying. I'm gonna rank these 2 cards together. Inferno Dragon and Inferno Tower are both B tier. And honestly, this is just because it takes a lot of time for their damage to start racking up. But once it does, it's really good against single targets like Golem, Giant, or any tank, really. But bad against Swarms or Electro Wizard. Exactly what you would expect out of a card like this. And there are certainly better tank counters. Knight, high B tier. It's a good. It's not amazing, but it's alright. It does what you place it to do. It just doesn't seem to do as well in as many situations as a card like a Lumberjack or a Valkyrie, or a Mini P.E.K.K.A. Lava Hound. Low B. Low B. Actually, C. Nope. I'm sorry. I don't have a good editing software, so I don't know if I'll be able to cut that out. I'm sorry if I don't. Yeah, sorry about that Discord ping. I don't think I'm gonna have a good enough editing software to cut that out. And if it's not cut out, I'm very sorry. Just know that I tried my best. Hopefully I don't get any more Discord pings. I forgot to turn on Do Not Disturb. I'm so smart. Lightning. High C. I'm gonna go with a high C. 3 targets, that's a joke for 6 elixir. When you compare it to a rocket, which does more damage and infinite targets, just smaller radius, which I guess in the end that bigger radius can help a lot, which is why it's gonna be a high C and not a low C. But yeah, Rocket is just better. Not that Rocket's good, it's just better than Lightning. Bandit. Low A. It's just a good card. That's all I can say. Good on offense. Okay on defense. If you can just get it to like repeatedly dash. If the enemy makes one small mistake against this card, it packs a punch. But usually that doesn't happen, at least for me anyway. So yeah, Bandit usually does well, for 3 elixir anyway. Lumberjack does a lot of damage, puts places at rage when he dies, so really, a Lumberjack all that damage is only 2 elixir in the end, and then that last 2 comes for the rage. It's such a high value card. It's middle to high A. McGarcher, middle B. Good versus swarms. Good at annoying you when it's on the other side of the bridge and can attack your king tower, or not king tower, attack your princess tower from the other side of the bridge because you misplaced one card. But that's honestly something that a lot of pro players like to avoid. But this is kind of the tier list for someone like me, the average player, who's not maxed and is not super competitive and knows everything that they're doing and avoids mistakes as much as they can. B tier for Mega Knight. This is one of the 2 most annoying cards, the other being Elite Barbarians. I'm struggling to decide which is more annoying, but wow, I hate this card so much, but I counter it easily most of the time. So yeah. Alright. Mega Minion, low B. It's not usually as good anymore as it used to be. It doesn't do enough damage to really attack effectively. It always seems to die anytime I face it. I don't use it enough to really say it's necessarily a great card. But yeah. Minor. High A. It is so much better than Goblin Barrel and Graveyard for dealing Crown Tower damage, as it has enough health to withstand any or most spells without being a negative elixir trade. In fact, it has enough elixir to withstand all spells without being a negative elixir trade. Congratulations, Minor. But honestly, there are troops that counter it well, like a Larry Army, Goblin Gang. So yeah, it can be countered, which is why it's not S tier. But that's a lot of damage on the Crown Tower for just 3 elixir. Mini P.E.K.K.A, same thing. Well, not really, but it's high A. Same tier, but not the same reason as Minor, for obvious reasons. Mini P.E.K.K.A is just so much damage for 4 elixir. The low health is kind of a weakness, I would say. But it's a weakness that's easy to overcome. And we're actually pretty close to done. Minion Horde. Low C. It's countered so easily. It's good if not, it's amazing if not countered. But it's so easy to counter. Minions, high C. It's not at all a hard card to deal with. But it's not really that much damage either, but at least when it gets countered, it's not nearly as much elixir lost as minions. Congratulations. Mirror, high D. It's so weak. Like, you can't call this card very good, realistically. It's one of those cards that, okay, if this was a touchdown tier list, this would be very high up there, because if you just mirror anything that's good, well, guess what? You're probably gonna get a crown. Like Hog Rider or Ram Rider, but that's not usually, this is not a touchdown tier list. This is a normal 1v1 tier list. So for obvious reasons, Mirror is D tier because it costs more elixir than the original card for just one more level. And in some cases, this is pretty good when an over-leveled card is amazing. That's not most cases. Mortar, low D. It's so bad. It's just like a worse Expo for less elixir, but so much worse to the point that the less elixir doesn't even help it. If it was a 3 or 2 elixir card, maybe it'd be alright. But as 4 elixir, absolutely not. So easy to deal with, and hardly ever does a good damage output. So yeah, if I were you, I would avoid using this card. Don't ever face it, which is probably a good thing because it is so bad. Like, and honestly, I kind of forgot it existed until this tier list. That's just how little I face it. Barbarian Barrel. High C. It's just a worse log, really. It's not that good. But the Barbarian, I guess, the Barbarian that comes out can do some damage. Mother Witch, B. No, A. High A. That my opinion changed so rapidly. That's just because I use it in one of my main decks. Whenever I face a Swarm, it makes my opponents feel like they can't use it more than once the match. And that first time, that one time being they didn't know I had the Mother Witch. It just makes them feel like they can't use the card unless I place my Mother Witch on the other side or something. So, yeah. Musketeer, B tier. It's alright. It does high-ish damage, but it's single target damage. Wouldn't you much rather use a Wizard? Wizard does more damage than Musketeer, I think. Not 100% positive on that. But I think the Wizard does more damage for single targets than Musketeer. Plus, Wizard has splash damage. And I think overall, Wizard just feels so much more powerful. Plus, I know Wizard does more single target damage per hit, but maybe per second. Once again, not 100% positive on that. Night Witch, high C. No, low B. I'm gonna move it to low B. It's a low B tier though, because it seems like whatever it does, other cards do better. You're looking for higher damage, there's Mini P.E.K.K.A. You're looking for group damage, there's Valkyrie. And I guess while the bats can attack air, that's not really something you're trying to pay attention to. If you're looking for range, there's Musketeer. It does almost the exact same. A lot of these cards do almost the exact same thing as Night Witch. In fact, let me use this meme. It does exactly what Mini P.E.K.K.A. and Valkyrie do, exactly what Night Witch do, but better. It's just not as good of a card right now. But ignoring those facts, Night Witch is not a terrible card to have in your deck. Alright, now for the big beast of all these cards, P.E.K.K.A. I'm gonna put it right in the middle of A tier. In my opinion, it's just an awesome card to have. A lot of damage, a lot of health, a lot of elixir. But that's so easy to, that high elixir price is so easy to overcome when all it does is completely destroy all of your single unit cards. And honestly, some of the duo unit cards as well, such as Elite Barbarians. It's so good on defense, and it's hard to counter without a swarm, really. I sometimes struggle to counter it because my only real swarm in my deck is a Goblin Gang, which probably is not the best thing to say. That's probably not the best example to set. Because a Goblin Gang is not the best counter to a P.E.K.K.A. It's a better counter to things like a Prince or a Mini P.E.K.K.A, not something as big and strong as a P.E.K.K.A. That's more something for a Larry army. Poison. A very underrated card. It's middle of A. Despite doing damage over time, that honestly pays off sometimes, as it does more damage than Fireball for the same elixir price, and with that buff where it now slows down units, it's more likely to stay in the poison. Units are more likely to stay in the poison the whole duration. So things like Wizard will die in a poison now, where they won't die from a Fireball. So that's another thing. A lot of things that barely survive a Fireball don't survive a poison. So that's really good, but the damage over time kind of takes away from that. But that poison buff has helped quite a bit. So yeah. Prince. I'm gonna put this in middle of B. It's just overall worse than P.E.K.K.A because it gets counted so much easier from lower end swarms that aren't Larry Army. Like Goblin Gang or Witch, Rascals, which I haven't seen a whole lot of recently. But yeah, Princess. I'm gonna go with pretty much right in the middle of B tier. Good chip damage. That's all I can call it. Just good chip damage. You cannot say anything else about it. Just good chip damage. Rage. This is going in F tier, honestly. This card is so bad. But there is one card that it fits well with, and that's a Balloon. Not in any way encouraging you to use that combination. It makes players hate the game more. And the less people playing this game, the longer it takes to find matches. You get where I'm going with this. Please, don't use Rage. It helps other people. But honestly, it's not even that good of a card if you do use it. It's just annoying. Everyone hates facing it. A Lumberjack has a much higher value. Ram Rider, I didn't mean to place it in B. Well, actually, I did. It's a B tier card. Ram Rider's okay. And that's about all it is. It's just okay. Rascals. I'm gonna go with C tier, but I do want to say one more thing about Ram Rider quickly. It's actually pretty good against a Balloon because it slows it down by a lot. So if you ever struggle to kill a Balloon, just place a Ram Rider on defense if that's what you use. It's good. Trust me on that one. I've done this stuff before. My 2v2 partners have done this stuff before. I know I said this is not a 2v2 tier list, but just because it works in 2v2, just because, maybe not, I don't know what I'm saying. It works in 2v2, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work in 1v1s as well. Barbarian Hut, C tier, not good. Not a good card in this meta. Just not enough barbarians for 7 elixir, considering the delay in the spawns. So yeah, probably not the best card to have. Not the sharpest tool in the shed. Rocket, mentioned it earlier. I'm gonna put it low B. It's better than Lightning, but not really good. So yeah, Royal Delivery, one of the most underrated cards in the game. It's so good. It does so much damage. The delay is annoying to deal with when you're using it, but it's an amazing card to have. It does so much damage for just 3 elixir, plus that recruit that pops out when it lands. It's just such a high value card. You cannot ignore how good it is. Royal Ghost. Let's see. Where do I want to put this card? I'm gonna go C. Royal Ghost. It does not put a whole lot of damage out. And while it's invisible, it doesn't seem to ever make a difference in the match. And even though it's only 3 elixir, this card could absolutely use a buff. Royal Giant. As much as I want to put this in a lower tier, it's A. I hate this card so much. It would probably be better for the game if it was just removed as a whole, but I don't think that Supercell would be exactly fond of doing that. Royal Hogs, or as I call, pigs. I just call them pigs. Not even royal pigs, just pigs. They're B tier. Now, if this was a touchdown tier list, this would easily, by a lot, be the best card in the game. But I'm not going to make that decision just yet. Royal, or pigs as I call it, pigs, they're not very good. Where did the wall breakers come from? What? So yeah, pigs, they work, just not as well as other cards, if that's what one should say. Royal recruits are bad. They're upper D tier, but that doesn't mean they're anything worth using. They're way below average. It's not a card that you should use a lot. Now for Larry Army, I'm going to put this in high A. It's just like Goblin Gang, although better against tanks like P.E.K.K.A. and Prince, but worse against tanks like... It's worse in some situations than Goblin Gang and better in others. It's worse when health is a factor, and it's better when health is not a factor. Like, for example, it's worse against Snowball or Zap, but it's much better against most tanks. Skeleton Barrel, low A. It's a nice win condition to have, especially when paired with a miner. If not defended, it can absolutely do a lot of damage, especially when paired with another tank like an Ice Golem or a miner. It can do so much damage. Never ignore it. Skeleton Dragons. This is a tough call, but I'm gonna go with high C. And it makes sense why. It's just an overall decent card. Below average, but does its job, I guess, for 4 elixir. Just attacks pretty slow, that's all. And I think that's the last of the cycle cards, which is the 1 elixir skeletons. The 1 elixir Larrys, as I would call them. I also call Skeleton Barrel Larry Barrel, fun fact. Larrys are just okay. Barbarians are probably slightly lower B, and that's because they're very weak against cards like Fireball or Poison. Not so much arrows, but they are pretty easy to counter. And they don't counter things like P.E.K.K.A, surprisingly. They do counter like Prince or Mini P.E.K.K.A, but not P.E.K.K.A. They don't counter like the cards that they need to counter. in order to be good. So, they are not good. Sparky, low A. Does good damage. Should not be underrated by any means. So, yeah. Spear Goblins. Far better than Goblins or Goblin Barrel. They do damage from a distance, which is alright for 2 Elixir. But nothing really too special. So yeah, time to move on. Finally, another S tier. Tesla is a card that should not be underrated. Tesla's so good on defense. And with an X-bow push, it's very annoying to deal with. And honestly, it's so annoying to face, but when I use it, which I do a lot, it's an awesome card to have. It saves me so many times, and in my opinion, it is by far the best building in the game. Log, A tier. A tier, not a question. High A for sure. It's very good against. It's lower elixir than arrows, but it does less damage and can't attack air. That's the trade-off. And because of that, it misses out on one-shotting a lot of cards, like Archers, Bomber. Sure, there's others I can't think of. I think it one-shots the guard shields, but arrows completely kills guards, so yeah, there's that. Three Musketeers, low C. Can't really put it anywhere else. It's not that good. For 9 elixir, it's so easy to counter, but it does a lot of damage if left you have to counter it, otherwise it's going to completely destroy you. But the fact is, it's so easy to counter, like with a Sparky or something. I use Sparky quite a bit. It's so easy to counter. Tombstone, C tier, 1 skeleton every like 2.5 seconds. Really? What is 1 skeleton gonna do? Sure, it adds up on defense, but the Tombstone has so low health, it usually just gets destroyed. Not that good. Like, at all. I don't recommend this card for any reason. Tornado. High A. It's a high skill cap card, but if used correctly, it is a damn right good card. My friends use it a lot in 2v2. I haven't used it a whole lot in 1v1. It's good for activating king towers in 1v1s and 2v2s. It's good at like stopping cards from doing what the opponent placed them to do, which is a huge thing that you want to do in this game. If your opponent places a card to do something that's really going to screw you up, a tornado is very good at stopping that card from doing what it wants to do. Well, I guess that kind of depends on the card they place and the situation you're in, but while it is a little situational, it's a very good card to have, nonetheless. Plus, if you ever need a little extra damage, it's there. Just arrows preferably for damage. Wall breakers are kind of in a tight spot right now. They don't do enough damage. Well, okay, they do a lot of damage, but they die too easily from things like a log or arrows. That's another thing they kill pretty easily. Valkyrie, S tier. S tier. For sure, S tier. It counters so many cards. And while it's weak against air units, that's only 1 minus to all the many pluses. Like, it's actually so good. You cannot ignore the fact that this card, if you don't use this card, you're probably going to do a lot worse than if you did use it. Remember, this is my opinion, so this is not based on any stats. But wow, is it a good card to have. I use it in all my decks. It's amazing. Which will be. I think this is for obvious reasons, which almost never seems to do well. Which, I feel like I always get destroyed by it, but I can never do well using it. Which, maybe I just suck, but it's not exactly top of the meta right now. There's other cards that are most certainly better, if you know what I mean. Also in the B tier is bats. Almost impossible to counter with a positive elixir trade, and usually does okay damage for defense, not so much offense, but that's for obvious reasons. Queen, S tier. This is the best champion by probably a lot. Yeah. Queen, really good to have. Does so much damage. If you can land that on the tower, she is a beast unless they have something like a fireball or a lightning or something to stop it instantly. It's going to do so much damage if you can put that thing on the tower. It goes to work. The Golden Knight, I'm going to put in C tier. He doesn't do enough damage, and his ability, not good. Like, not at all good. The dash ability is so weak compared to the Skeleton King and the Archer Queen's abilities. Like, come on, going invisible is a much better ability. And going invisible and more than doubling in damage, that's way better than a dash. Sure, it's less elixir, but not less elixir than this one. Skeleton King's A tier. Also pretty situational, but if you use it right, if you put it in the right situation, you got yourself a deal. It's so good to have. It does. If you can get a lot of your troops die while he's alive, like if you're to place a Goblin Gang or a Larry Army or a Larry Barrel or something, then have that Skeleton King down somewhere, all those troops die, and then they can basically just all come back with the help of this hero or champion because of 2 elixir for that ability. It's a really strong card to have, and while being situational, I would not ignore its power. So that's gonna wrap it up for this tier list. Oh, we haven't decided the best card yet. It's a pretty tough call, actually. I'm gonna say no to Dark Goblin and no to Tesla. Other 3 are still in play. It might be Arrows, honestly. But Valkyrie is so good. Valkyrie kills more troops. Arrows is just really good at dealing with troops lower end. And Archer Queen just packs such a huge punch. This is a really hard decision to make. I don't know. And honestly, I'm not even going to go by elixir cost like I usually do because this is all based on their elixir costs. How good are they? Like, obviously, if this wasn't involving elixir cost at all, Archer Queen would be the best card. But because it is by elixir cost, I don't know. This is a tough decision to make, like I said once. Said it once, say it twice. I think I'm gonna go with the Archer Queen, honestly. It's... I don't have it, but I do use it in draft battles when I have it to pick. It's such a good card to have on your defense and offense. That ability, popping that ability just does so much extra damage. And for only 5 elixir, and I guess 1 for every ability used, but that usually only makes it 6 elixir because it usually only lives to use 1 ability. It's a very good card to have, and I think it fits into any deck. Of course, assuming you have it, which most players don't. So, that's it. Goodbye. Let me know how you feel about this. Keep in mind, this is completely my opinion based on what I face and use. How often I face it. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you leave down your tier lists in the comments. Again, no stats were used for this. This is just my opinion. Goodbye, everyone. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time.